Yeah, I think the Watkins Glen venue is really important to the early development of sports car racing in the United States, because sports car racing got started not right here in Watkins Glen, but in Westchester County in New York in the early 30s, probably about 1932, with the Collier brothers, who were racing on their father's estate. They formed a small club called the Automobile Racing Club of America. And they had some rich friends who had different kinds of cars. Some of them were American-based specials, but they did bring in some Jags, MGs. Baron Collier brought in a J2 MG, which he raced there. And they raced on a road course that they did on the father's estate. From that, they started looking for real road courses, and one of the places they developed was up in Alexandria Bay, New York, in the Thousand Islands area, and they actually raced through the streets there. And it was very exciting. They did it for 3 years, I think, 36, 37, 38. They had large crowds, lots of MGs, lots of foreign cars, and the connection there was a fellow named Tom Dewitt, who was connected with one of the New York newspapers, and so he was their entree to Alexandria Bay. And then World War II intervened, and that ended all club activity, and actually the Automobile Racing Club of America disbanded at the start of World War II. They subsequently, after the war, all of these men were still interested in sports cars. Most of them still had them, and they were part of the formation of the Sports Car Club of America. And these gentlemen, largely based on the East Coast and largely coming from that earlier club, started thinking about racing. And Cameron Arkensinger from Watkins Glen right here, he was the man who talked the club into maybe sponsoring a race here, and then he went the other step and was instrumental in talking the town fathers into having racing here at Watkins Glen. And from the beginning in 1948, it was very much a community project, and I think we saw that last night with the downtown festival, where the whole community was really pitching in. And that's the way it was especially in the early days of the racing. The community benefited from it a great deal. Different clubs sold programs and hot dogs and all of that sort of thing, and it was very much a community-based sort of activity. It was, must have been wonderful here in the late 40s and the very early 50s when they were actually racing through the streets, using the back roads we were on yesterday. They did call that first race in 1948 here at Watkins Glen a Grand Prix, but it really wasn't a true Grand Prix in that there weren't Formula One cars running or anything else. The first Grand Prix did not happen until 1961, real one with Formula One cars, and the whole international circus started in 1961, and that was on the closed circuit up here on the hill. But in the early days, it was strictly sports cars, strictly amateurs. So many of them drove their cars here and taped the headlights and went racing, and then took the tape off and drove home. And those were some very colorful days in the history of sports car racing here in this country.
At what point did it actually become vintage?
Well, the vintage is when young things get old, I guess, and the vintage racing movement had an early start, but it didn't gain in popularity probably until the 80s. And this is a track that the Vintage Sports Car Club of America has stayed away from, I think, probably because it's heavily used by professional race groups, and secondly, it seems to me a track that is tough on a vintage car, but with more people going vintage racing, they needed more tracks, and Watkins Glen once again became a very popular choice. And because of the history and the romance of the area of the early sports car racing, it's a very popular vintage site for this fall festival.